pointing finger and saying they are wrong. We have a greater responsibility to really be able to speak intelligently and effectively to say, what do we stand for and why? And what does it mean for us to say that this is truly what Christianity stands for, and this is what Bible stands for? So that's what we've been doing. And we've been talking, and then I really identified 8 tenets of the progressive Christianity. And one of them really is about idea being we are to be inclusive of all people, that there is no distinction in Jesus. Scripture says that there is no man, woman, child, citizen or alien, or the Jew or Gentile. He says in Christ, everybody is all equal. And so we are talking about this idea of inclusive of all people. And, one of the real issues of our time that we are dealing with about the inclusivity issue is the immigration issue. Immigration has always been the way that we have lived in this world with people who are different. In biblical time, there were no quote unquote boundaries, meaning people could travel anywhere into the world and settle anywhere they want to. This is what we see over and over again. Now we see in the Egyptian era, in Egypt, the Israelites were not treated well. But in other parts, we have seen, especially in the story of Abraham, that he could go wherever he wanted and settle, and as long as there's peace with the people that were there. Last administration made an issue with people coming into the United States. And he had vilified the immigrant community. And he had vilified people who were not of European heritage as the people who are aliens, so who were strangers to this land. And he really tried to make this concept, tried to promote this concept that America means you have to be white. So he was trying to promote the idea that the initial creation of quote unquote America or United States of America was intended only for those Europeans of the Western European heritage, and so therefore he was trying to say this has to be a white country. And many of us, and we had our conversations where we said that is so unbiblical, that is unethical, that's immoral, and that it just stands contrary to everything we know of Scripture and of God. So one of the most the stark issues of our time is about DACA recipients. The people who are brought here as children by the parents. And so where we have to really we have to recognize is that immigrant, one of the definitions of being immigrant is that you are not only from another country or you're born some other country. To be an immigrant means you had the opportunity and the choice and the power to migrate, to make that decision to migrate. So that's what it means. And then immigrant means you no longer are moving. You're no longer migrating. You have settled. So migrants are the ones who are moving, and immigrants are the ones who are settled and who are part of the community. And so in some ways, we are misusing the words immigrants in the United States today. But the concept is that if you were to be called an immigrant or the migrant, then you have to have a choice and you have to have the power and opportunity to make decision to immigrate, to move, and you had the ability to do so. Except what we have are children of immigrants who did not make their choice of their own. I was a child when my parents decided to immigrate to the United States. They brought me, I was 11 years old. I happened to come because my parents came. So technically, I'm not an immigrant because my existence in the United States is not of my own choosing. It is by my parents' choosing. And so now we have others whose parents chose to come and brought their children, and they are now ones that are in this midst of trying to figure out what their lives are going to be. And you know, the DACA stands for Deferred Action for Children, child arrivals. Is that the proper, the child arrivals? So those who arrived as children, and so United States said, until we have our policy figured out, we will not do anything to deport them. And so they're in this limbo state where they are not accepted and approved as people who can reside here, nor will United States government do anything to actively look to find them to say they do not belong here. And so their education, their healthcare, and all their future were all always in limbo. My cousins were brought illegally by, they came on a visitor's visa with a passport, visitor's visa, and my uncles decided to stay. The children didn't know it until they decided they wanted to go to college. And they were applying to colleges, and all of a sudden it's like, what is my legal status? And they just applied, and all of a sudden they found out, no, you're illegal, you're undocumented. And all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, that means I can't go to college. And so they ran into all kinds of problems. And some of them were able to find some, because some relief in 1980s, because when United States gave the amnesty program, some of them then became, found a way to become citizens, and some others did not. And they remained undocumented, and some of them were eventually caught and deported. And so there's a whole spectrum of that even in my own family. So what I wanted to do is really bring to life for us the human side of DACA story, not just the idea about policy or immigration policy or government, but it's about individuals and what they go through, so we can hear the human side of what is going on. And in part of that, I had to put out a request for some speakers. And of course, there's due to communication and busyness of things between Guillermo Torres and myself, there were some miscommunication. So Leticia was not connected earlier. And finally, he was able to reach out through some other people today. And she was gracious to say she will come and speak to us. And so this is why there's a change in our program, but I thought it was so important for us to hear from her, because to me, this is one of the most important issues of our time. And I'm just glad that we have opportunity to hear from Leticia today. So I hope this gives you a little bit of background. What are some of your thoughts? Any questions you might have about what you might want to hear from Leticia today? So why don't you guys just unmute yourself now, and Leticia can, I'm sure she can speak to a number of things, but I'm sure she would like to know something about yourselves, who you are and where you are, and so that she feels a little more comfortable, like she's among friends. So, and so Kristen, I want to start, introduce yourself, tell her about a little bit about your thoughts, and so that you can give Leticia something to work off.
Yeah. So I'm Christina. I'm a political science major. I'm a sophomore from Rochester, New York. That's where I am right now. It's super windy outside. I'm super excited to hear you speak. I found out today and I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be cool. I think it was last March or something. I had the opportunity to go down with a group from the Presbyterian Peacemaking Program, and we got to visit like some refugee camps at the border and talk to some lawyers who were helping people with the immigration process. So I got a little more firsthand familiarity with that. But I think something that just, especially even in my classes too, when we talk about immigration, we forget about the people who are like sort of already here and trying to figure out where they fit in once they get here. We're always focused about how they get here, when they get here. But I think it's really important that we incorporate people who are already here because they're already here. So why can't they just legally be here? So anyway, yeah. Marika, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, my name's Marika. I'm a computer science game student. I'm a junior. Yeah, I would just be really interested to hear about how like being involved with DACA has affected like how you approach politics locally, like in your community, and just yeah, I guess basically how you approach like being involved in the political process due to your background. Michael, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, is it Leticia? I think that's how you, correct me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. But my name is Michael, pronouns he, him, his. I am a senior. I double major in NGOs and social change and religion. And um, so I guess from my majors alone, it kind of, I've sort of, as part of my studies have been around immigration, of course, especially, and also my own experience as coming from immigrant families, has also informed me about immigration in general. But of course, there's always, I don't want to say always. Hold on, just one second. There's the U.S. has had a long history of colonialism, imperialism overseas, which causes immigration to come and the refugee crisis um, to kind of happen. I guess if that's even the right way to put it. But there's a lot of connecting factors that lead to immigration. Why there's so many people crossing, the southern border, and colonialism, imperialism by the U.S. over past decades, have definitely contributed to that. And so, yeah, so I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but Tiniola, we are just introducing ourselves to Leticia. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, sorry, you guys kind of cut off for a second, but hi, I'm Tenny. I am a senior here at USC. I actually know Eleanor. I know she hasn't like been around for a minute, but yeah.
Great to have you. Thank you for joining us. Leticia, would you like to kind of introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. First of all, good afternoon. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today. Christina, thank you for being here, even though it's what, 8 p.m. Where you're at. So I really do appreciate that. So yeah, thank you so much for joining. I usually go by Leti just because that's just what I grew up being called. And now whenever people call me by my full name, I'm just sort of not used to it. Sometimes I don't even react to that. So my apologies, but feel free to call me Leti. That's what everybody calls me. But yeah, Sunny, would you like me to just jump into it?
Yeah, so I just want to say thank you, everybody. And Leti, if you don't mind, we also like to hear your personal story about yourself and your own story, and really the emotional part about how you deal with this and live in this stress of uncertainty and that kind of stuff. And if you don't mind sharing some personal things, I think that would really help us as well. So, but here you go. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think what I'll do is I'll maybe do like a basic, Leti 101 sort of thing. And then I'll try to answer the questions that folks mentioned within that. But if not, I'll definitely come back to them. I wrote them down. And of course, if folks have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm here to answer absolutely anything you all might be wondering. In full confidence, right? I'm not gonna be like, oh, how do you live in America and not know this? Like, right, that's not what we're doing here. I want to be as helpful to you as possible. And to be honest, in return, you all being informed is beneficial to me, right? So it's a win-win here. So yeah, just to get started again, my name is Leti. I am originally from Tijuana, so like right across the border. I always make that joke. I'm like from right here. So I live in Baldwin Park, California, which is maybe like on a good day with no traffic, 30 minutes from USC. Obviously, you know, being in LA on a Friday afternoon, that could take 2 hours. But I've lived here since 2000. I got here August 19th of 2000 with my mom, my dad, well, my mom and my brother. My dad was already here. He came a month in advance because we were having some issues at home, a couple of issues. The biggest reason for why we moved here was because at that time, my paternal grandmother had been diagnosed with cancer, and we were running out of money to pay for her chemotherapy in Tijuana. So my dad came over here with the idea that he was gonna, you know, make some dollars, send them back home. You know, within 2 to 3 weeks, he realized he was making so much more money within, you know, 2 to 3 days of working than he was making literally in 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks working back home, right? The difference was just enormous. And he thought that there was, you know, more opportunities here, and that the best thing for him to do was to bring the family over here. So the plan was never to be here, right? It just sort of worked out that way. So yeah, we got here in 2000. We almost left because 2001 happened, right? 9/11, and there were so many crazy thoughts about, you know, DC is next, Chicago, LA, you know, these big cities. The thought was, you know, that's next. And my parents were sort of like, these are not our problems. We just got here. I think we're just gonna go back home. Obviously, we ended up staying, right, which I think was the right call. I'm grateful for that. But yeah, my whole life has been here in Baldwin Park, California. I went to all the public schools. Kindergarten was an absolute nightmare for me. All I remember about kindergarten was crying. I barely spoke any Spanish. You know, I didn't pick up any English until I was in first grade. And there's this sort of gap in my memory where it's like I didn't speak any English at all. And then all of a sudden I spoke all the English. So I don't know what happened in that gap. I can't quite remember. It might be some suppressed trauma, more likely than not. But I really can't remember that part. But I do remember, you know, back in 2000, I was placed in a kindergarten class, and the teacher was this older white woman that spoke no Spanish, and I spoke no English, and my parents didn't either. So the only way I was able to get through kindergarten was because there was one little girl who could sort of kind of translate. Now, can you imagine a 5-year-old, you know, trying to translate things to another 5-year-old? Like I don't know how we made that work, but we did, and I am forever grateful for that person that was able to help at that time. So yeah, that was elementary school for me. And for some reason, I always felt different, and it may have stemmed right from the fact that from the very beginning I didn't speak the language. I did grow up in a predominantly Hispanic area. I would even say predominantly Mexican area. So with my peers, I felt, you know, more or less connected, but there were like these little differences that I would start catching. So for example, kids would say, "Oh, I'm Mexican." And I'd be like, "Oh, cool. Where are you from?" And they'd be like, "Oh, West Covina." I was like, "Well, that's not Mexico. You're not Mexican." I am Mexican. I'm born in Tijuana. And they'd be like, "No, but I'm Mexican too." You know, so I started realizing that yes, we're Mexican, but I'm a different kind of Mexican, sort of thing. And the other very peculiar thing, I don't know if folks are familiar with it, but in Mexico and in a lot of different countries of Central and Latin America, we all get this shot. I'm exactly not sure what it is for, but there's this shot that leaves a scar on your right arm. It's like a round scar. We all have it. That's pretty much how you know that we're not born in the US, right? So I got to an age. Oh, okay.
It's
That's what it
polio.
is. That's what it is. I don't even know what it is, but I know I got it because I got the scar to prove it. Um, so that was, you know, like a physically differentiating factor, right? And I remember when I got to junior high, people started asking me about it, and it actually did make me uncomfortable to the point that, you know, I was okay with wearing, you know, long sleeves or a longer sleeve that would cover it up just because I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to go into detail about it. But again, I knew I was different. I didn't quite know in what way. So I found out in what way In junior high, I wanted to accompany some friends on a trip to SeaWorld in San Diego. So I asked for permission, and I was very hesitant about asking because money, right? We've always struggled with money. So I was hesitant to ask for that reason, but then my mom explained, it's not safe, and that's why I'm not allowing you to go. And I was like, what do you mean it's not safe? And then she explained, it's too far down south. There could be issues with you, going a little bit too far, or being questioned by other folks. And that's sort of when I started to understand, okay, this isn't good, right? This not only is this very different, but it's not good for me, right? This is going to cause complications. And other things started to make sense to me at that point, right? I remember growing up with a lot of kids who would be gone all summer because they were in Mexico with their family, and they would just spend the summers in Mexico and come back. And that was always so cool to me. And I never understood, if I'm an actual Mexican, right? Compared to these other folks that are born here, if I'm an actual Mexican, why can't we go back? Why haven't we been back? How come I can't see my cousins and my aunts and my uncles and everybody else that we left behind? And but they can, like, why can't we go? And then other issues that we went through when I was young. Simple traffic stops with my parents ended up in the police completely taking away our cars. So I can safely say, from ages maybe like 5 to 12 or 13, we probably had 7, 8, 9 different cars, just because they were cars that we would buy for $800, $900. And if there was, they were cars that were barely functional. So if something like a brake light wasn't working and we didn't replace it right away, and my dad happened to get pulled over, there goes the car, right? Because you don't have a license, they take the car away from you immediately. So I remember the specific instance. We were all in the car. I don't quite remember where we were heading, but that exact situation happened where there was a brake light that went out. My dad wasn't even aware. We got pulled over. The cop essentially gave us 20 minutes to take out all of our belongings and call someone. We didn't have any cell phones, so what we had to do was pretty much carry everything that we could, all our belongings that we could, take them with us, and we just walked. To me, it seemed like we walked for hours. We probably walked for like 20 minutes to like some Burger King that was nearby. And we waited there. We borrowed their phone there. We called my uncle. My uncle came to pick us up. So that happened quite a bit to us. It happened a lot. So obviously that's impacted, my relationship now with police enforcement. I'm super paranoid about making sure that everything in my car is functional at all times, right? I think as a direct result of that. But yeah, that was in junior high, right? I then went to high school, where things started becoming a little more real to me, more serious. And obviously, as you get older, you start to further understand things. And when I was in high school, I've always liked school. It's something that I just really enjoy. I really enjoy learning, being in the classroom setting. So immediately I knew that I wanted to go to college, and my goal was always UCLA. So all that I am a Bruin. So my goal was always UCLA, and happy to sit here and say that it was achieved, but it was a very, very difficult path, and that all started in high school. So my junior year of high school, I sort of had this epiphany where I realized that this was going to be probably the hardest thing that I was ever going to have to do up to that point in my life, right? To get this. Why? Because at that time, there was no California Dream Act. So the California Dream Act allows certain undocumented folks, mostly if you have been here for 3 consecutive years of schooling in a California school, to receive the Cal Grant. So the Cal Grant is, state financial aid. Not eligible for federal financial aid, not yet. That hasn't happened, and I don't think that's going to happen soon. But you're eligible for California state financial aid. So that happened. And then obviously DACA happened. But during my junior year, neither one of these things was in existence, right? So I didn't know those things were going to become available to me. I saw a tremendously uphill battle in my foreseeable future. So I figured, disillusioned, right? I figured, okay, I can go to community college and work and save and figure something out. So that was my initial plan. Thankfully, right, it didn't go that way. Again, I was very, very lucky. So the California Dream Act and DACA both came into effect in 2012. And I graduated high school in 2013. So I was super, super, super lucky that that worked out for me. But even then in high school, so I had a very, very unpleasant experience with my high school counselor. To this day, I don't know if it was something that she did out of malice, or if it's something that she did because she wasn't informed, so she wasn't doing her job, or she just didn't care. I don't know. But what happened was that I was a senior in high school applying for the California the Cal Grant, like everybody else in my classroom. And we all filled out the form together during our English class. Filled it out on the computer, sent it out. No, sorry, we filled it out by hand. We handed it back to our counselor. Our counselor was in charge of uploading that to the computer, sending it to the folks that distribute the Cal Grant, and then we would hear our offers, right? Because if you go to a community college or a Cal State or a UC or a private school, the amount of money you get is different. So I submitted my form to her along with everybody else. Folks were hearing back about their Cal Grant offers within 2-3 weeks. I was waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, didn't hear anything. So then I went to the office of my counselor, and I was like a scene out of a movie, right? I walked into her office to ask her if there were any updates on my situation. And I walk in and my form is on top of a stack, probably about this big, just on the corner of the desk. And I was like, is that my Cal Grant application? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, did you get a chance to submit that? And she was like, no, I can't submit it because there's no social security number on it. I was like, well, the California Dream Act just passed. I don't need a social security number. I am like legally eligible for this aid. And she explained that she could not upload it because it didn't have a social. And that was her recurring statement. I can't. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm explaining to you that I am eligible for this. So she said, look, I'm not going to upload it. I'm not going to submit it. If you want to submit it, go ahead, but it's due in 2 days. You have to mail it out. And if it's not postmarked by March 2nd, then it's not going to be accepted. So I grabbed my form immediately, ran out, right, called my mom as soon as I could, had her take me to the post office. So at that time, folks weren't as open about their status. Not to say that folks are open about their status now, right? I think especially in the last 4 years, folks are probably even less likely to be open about their status. But back then it was, super, super low key. So it was just not something that you talk about, especially at that age, right? Especially in high school, it was not something that you would discuss. So I knew there were other forms there from other undocumented seniors, but I didn't know who they were, right? I probably knew only 2 or 3 other people that were in the same situation. So I went to them, I found them, I called them, I let them know, go get your form. My mom will take us to the post office to get this mailed out ASAP. But I did what I could, and I asked them, if you know anybody else, hit them up, let them know, come, we all got to go do this now. But there were other forms that, I never got to because I didn't know who they belonged to. And my counselor certainly wasn't going to tell them because she didn't tell me, right? This was 2 days before the form was due, and she didn't bother to let me know. Had I walked in a couple of days later, I probably wouldn't be here right now because I probably wouldn't have gone to UCLA without that money. That's the reality. So, thankfully we were able to do that. I was able to get the aid. There was another instance with a different counselor, right? And again, counselors are supposed to be folks that are supposed to support you, help you, guide you. That was not my experience, right? Another counselor was encouraging me to not use my fee waivers on UCs, encouraging me to not apply to the school of my dreams and to instead use that fee waiver for a safety school. That's what he said. He said something that's up and coming, like UC Merced. Definitely not throwing any dirt on UC Merced. It's such an amazing school. They do so much for their students. But he was telling me, your dream isn't feasible, sort of thing. That's what he was telling me. So I said, screw you. I believe in myself. I got folks that believe in me. I'm going to go for it. And I went for it, right? But if I had been anybody else, if I didn't have that support system elsewhere, it would have been very easy for me to just take what he was telling me as an absolute truth, and I would have just done that, right? And again, I probably wouldn't be sitting here speaking to you all today. So that was high school for me, right? It's been a constant, struggle of not having the support from people that their job is to support you. And I've been very fortunate to find different people along the way, to provide that support and that additional support that I have so desperately needed, and that guidance, because I wasn't getting it from where I was supposed to be getting it. And again, I don't know what their actual intentions were, right? I'm not saying that they intended to be or to act, yeah, right, from a way of malice. Like, that's definitely not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that they didn't do their jobs, right? And that to me was very hurtful. So I ended up going to UCLA, thankfully, political science major as well. But I also picked up a labor studies minor. So the summer of 2016, I did a fellowship. It's called the Dream Summer Fellowship. I actually now run that fellowship. That's my job now. But that fellowship absolutely changed my life. For the first time in my life, I walked into a room with 80 other undocumented people from across the country, of all different nationalities, races, ethnicities. Like, it was insane, the different, like the variety of it was just the most amazing experience I've ever had, to walk into that room and know that these other 80 people knew exactly what I was going through and what I've been through and what we have ahead of us, right? That kind of support is just so hard to find elsewhere, right? No matter how much somebody wants to support you, if they don't have that personal experience, they're never going to understand. And it's not their fault, and they should not be expected to understand, right? And obviously, we welcome all the support that we can get, but it's just a different connection, right? When you can connect with somebody on that level. So I did that fellowship, changed my life, changed my career path. I initially thought I wanted to be an attorney, an immigration attorney. Scrap that. I don't want to do that. I realized what my actual goal was, right? My idea behind being an attorney was I want to help people. But then I realized if you're an attorney, at least in my mind, the way that it makes sense to me, right? If you're an attorney, you're working within these systems, within these, procedural systems. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to help build something new. And to me, policy was the way to go. So that's the career path that I decided to take. But yeah, this Dream Summer program completely changed my life. And like I mentioned, that was the summer of 2016. So I went back to UCLA to finish for my senior year that fall. Obviously, November 2016 happened. Safe to say, the election of Donald Trump as president was easily top 2-3 worst nights of my life ever. The next day I woke up feeling like if I had lost a family member, like if somebody had died. That's how I felt. I felt grief. And I was at my dorm at UCLA when this happened, at my apartment at UCLA when this happened. So I wasn't home with my parents, but I remember calling my parents the next day. I couldn't call them the night of. I couldn't have that conversation with them. But I called them the next day, and I was a complete mess, and I was expecting for my parents to pick up the phone and be a complete mess, and they were so chill. They were like, we've been here before this guy, we're gonna be here long after this guy. Like, we made it through Bush, we made it through Obama, we're gonna make it through this guy, and we're gonna make it through the next guy and the next guy and the next guy. Like, whatever this guy can do, don't worry about it, we're gonna figure it out. And so that, it gave me such a mixture of feelings, right? On one side it was like reassuring to hear it, but on the other side it was just like this amaze, like, how can my parents be so resilient, right? How can they be so strong, right? I have all this going for me, right? I'm in college, I'm in my 20s, I have my whole life ahead of me, and I'm falling apart. And these are folks that literally don't even have a day to take a break during the week from work, and they're so ready for the challenge, and once I saw that, I was like, all right, I need to get it together because they're ready to go. I need to be ready to go with them, right? So I applied. So I don't know how familiar you are all with DACA, but there's a component of DACA and of a couple other programs that's called advanced parole. So advanced parole essentially allows to leave the country and to re-enter the country for 3 reasons. One, humanitarian reason. So that means you have a immediate family member that is very, very sick or in a very delicate complication. You can request permission to go see them and to come back. So that's humanitarian. There's an educational reason, so like studying abroad. And then obviously for employment reasons. So say your job absolutely needs you to do something in any other country and you can prove it, then they'll give you a permission, of course, after they charge you $575 for the permit. So I really wanted to do something like that while I was in college. But of course, when this administration came in, we decided it was not safe because one of the very first things that they promised was, we're going to get rid of the DACA program as soon as we come into office. So we were waiting for that. Obviously, that didn't come until September of 2017 when Jeff Sessions had the audacity to go up and say that DACA recipients were potentially criminals, which is ridiculous because we probably have the cleanest records of any group, right? Because we have to. So yeah, that was a straight up lie. But I couldn't take this risk, so I decided I'm not going to study abroad. I'm going to try the UCDC program instead. So the UCDC program is a joint program by all the different UCs. Happens every quarter. I know you folks are on the semester system, but UCLA is on the quarter system. And I went in the quarter of winter 2017, which was January 2017 through March 2017. Donald Trump was inaugurated on January 20th, 2017. I had the very unique experience of being at the inauguration because we were able to get tickets through the program. I was currently interning at the Senate at that time. So that's how we were able to get tickets. And oh my God, if I told you all that the night he got elected was top 3 on my worst days of my life, the inauguration was probably top 2. Because it was so surreal to me, right? I was coming from this blue bubble, this blue island that is Southern California, predominantly Hispanic area that I lived in, right? I went to a fairly progressive, could do much better, but fairly progressive compared to other places, in terms of school, UCLA, right? So just to be there and to be standing in a sea of red hats, surrounded by 400,000 people chanting all kinds of things to President Obama, to First Lady Michelle Obama, to Hillary Clinton, right? They were saying, I would never repeat the words that they said, but to hear them say these things, and then for them to say, okay, now let's bow our heads in prayer. I was like, what is happening? Like the cognitive dissonance here is actually frightening. And I physically feared for my safety. Like I stood there and I didn't say a word to anybody. I did not want to interact with anybody. I didn't want to look at anybody. I was just there sort of taking it all in. And, for your first encounter with a Trump supporter to be an encounter with 400,000 Trump supporters was a crazy, crazy experience. But it was a wake-up call, right? Because me and my California bubble, I couldn't fathom anybody that could genuinely believe that this man was the best person for our country, or people that genuinely felt like they shared their values with what he was saying. And I was standing in a sea of people that felt the same way he did. And that changed me. Like, I was like, oh, heck no, like, I need to get back home. And there's so much work that we need to do because we need to get this guy out in 4 years. Because if we don't, he's going to ruin us. Right. And obviously, the next 4 years were so tremendously stressful. Like I mentioned, DACA was rescinded in September of 2017. I graduated college in June of 2017. So with DACA being rescinded, I was like, what am I gonna do? Yes, I have my permit for an extra year, right? But what happens after that? like what happens to my plans, my goals, what happens to my job, right? Like where do we go after that? I wanted to go to grad school, but I purposely put it off until this guy was out of office. I was like, no way am I going to go into a situation where I need money, because I don't know if I'll have a job by then. So maybe to provide you all with a little bit more context, before I had DACA, right? DACA provides you with a work authorization and a social security number. So before I had those two things, I was working in factories. I was doing little side hustles here and there. I was working under the table. And after DACA, you know, I was able to get a job at a law firm, and I am now working for UCLA, right? So it was the biggest change in my life, right? It made all the absolute difference. And you know, now I have healthcare. I never had healthcare in my life. Like the first time I went to a dentist, I got yelled at by the dentist because I had I don't know how many cavities, and he was like, "How come you never been to a dentist before?" And I was like, "Sir, I didn't have health insurance till like 2 days ago," right? So it's simple things like that, right? It's simple things like that that make you feel like such an outsider, like such a foreigner, like such a, I don't know, like it's so weird, right? For someone to not even consider the fact that, hey, maybe I didn't have access to this, right? And even while I was in school, you know, I was working job after job after job, and for that reason, I wasn't really able to participate in a lot of different school activities. You know, I would have loved to be part of so many different clubs, but I didn't have a chance to do that. Why? Because I had to work, and on the weekends, I had to come back home to work, right? So I feel like I missed out on a lot of different things in college for those reasons. But yeah, I guess maybe to sort of bring it back full circle, like I said, I now run the Dream Summer Fellowship Program, which is it's a national fellowship that provides professional development and leadership development for immigrant youth. It is a paid fellowship, so you know it's very hard to get a fellowship that's paid sometimes, and obviously folks like us can't do free labor, right? We need money, so for a fellowship to be paid, right, and to provide you with that professional development, and to provide you with these connections and these opportunities to meet other people that are in the same boat as you know, it's tremendous. So I run that now, and currently applying to grad schools and waiting to hear back from grad schools. um, but that's where I am now, right? And now with this new administration, to be completely honest, I think at the beginning there was hope. Right now, there's not so much, because we've seen, you know, over a month go by, and there were certain things that were promised to us, and we haven't really seen anything. Not even heard from them that they want to do certain things, right? We see a ton of different bills get introduced. To me, that's a bad sign, because it shows that there is no connection within the movement. Like, who are you talking to? Who's the administration talking to pass this bill? Because we didn't approve on this, right? Like there's so many different things happening, and I just don't know like where we all stand as an immigrant movement, right? Maybe before I open it up for you all for questions, or I address the questions that you all had mentioned at the beginning, I will say that very grateful for DACA, right? Very grateful for the for those numbers that were given to us by President Obama, right? They made a huge difference. But I will also say this: there was a lot of guilt in me when I applied for DACA, right? Because what makes me more valuable to receive this than my parents, than my aunts, my uncles, some of my cousins don't qualify for it, because there's this ridiculous rule that you had to be here on June 15, 2007 or before to qualify. And you had to be here June 15, 2012. So if you can't prove that, you're not eligible. You don't qualify. And if you can't afford to pay for it, oh, well, sorry, right? That's $500. You don't got $500? Sorry, we can't give you anything, right? So for me, it was a very bittersweet moment, right? It was like, do I take this and throw people under the bus, right? Because if I am not a priority for deportation, then who is? Everybody else that lives with me, everybody else that isn't eligible for this, right? But if I don't take this, and if I don't take this social security number and I don't get that higher paying job, how am I going to help them, right? How am I going to give them money to pay rent and bills and all that stuff, right? So it was sort of like the lesser of two evils. And I said, all right, I'm gonna take it, and I'm gonna, work really, really hard to make sure that I'm using this to provide for my family, which is, what I think a lot of us went through. So even with DACA, it's fundamentally flawed. They tried to do away with it with the stroke of a pen. They almost got away with it. I didn't think the Supreme Court was going to rule in our favor. I think that was a tremendous surprise for most of us in the movement. We were preparing for the absolute worst. Like, I already had a plan. So like we weren't expecting for those news. But yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. I feel like I talked for quite a bit. If anybody has any follow-up questions, again, feel free to ask me absolutely anything. More than happy to share. And if not, I can just come back to the initial questions that were asked.
If you have any questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead and ask questions. Just say your name first so that Leti knows who she's responding to. Anyone?
I had a
Christina, go ahead.
So you said you had a plan if they took away DACA, and I mean, I imagine still now, since you don't know if you'll be able to become a citizen anytime in the near future or anything like that. What was your plan, and do you still have some type of emergency plan now?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I put off grad school for a while, right? Because I was like, I need to work for as long as possible and save up as much money as possible, because what happens if I lose my job, right? I need to have some kind of cushion, some kind of, somewhere that I can pull funds from, because obviously my parents, can't help me financially. So the plan was, right, to work as an independent contractor, to form something like an LLC. So I don't know how familiar you are all with independent contracting, but to work in that way, you don't need a social. All you need is an ITIN, which is a tax ID number that literally anybody can get regardless of status. As a matter of fact, that is how most undocumented folks do their taxes, because undocumented folks do pay taxes. We get nothing in return, but we do pay taxes. So the plan was to work in that way, and I was going to pitch this idea to my workplace and say, pretty much like, you can hire me as a contractor, and you won't even be paying me benefits because I'm an independent contractor. So by definition, you don't give me benefits, and I want to work in this way. And I had also already sort of scoped out a couple of other places that do work with contractors in that way. So, if it came down to it, I was ready to make money one way or another, right? But the option was never to just sort of sit around and wait. There was always a plan in motion, right? And I think for a lot of us, and I do want to highlight that, folks that are not eligible for DACA for one reason or another do work this way. A lot of folks do work this way as contractors, as independent contractors, just because, that's the way to make a little bit of money, aside from employment. That's sort of the way to have employment when you don't have social, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Leti. Anyone else? While people are thinking, let me ask you a question, Leti. Then, one of the concerns that people had expressed when they were signing up for DACA is the fact that you had revealed to U.S. government, give your name to them and tell them where you live, which was exactly opposite of everything you've been working on. So how did you deal with that? And did you have that fear when you were applying for DACA?
I still have that fear of, the US government knows exactly where I live, who I live with, right? What I look like, what my weight is, what, I do for a living, like absolutely everything, right? So it felt like making a deal with the devil to some degree. It was like, okay, I'll take this work permit, but here's absolutely everything you ever needed to know about me. And of course, maybe, I don't mind giving my personal information to some extent, right? I know it's a trade, but I do live in the same house as my parents, as my siblings. At some point or another, we typically host another couple of family members. So that continues to be a concern for me and for a lot of us, right? It's, I remember a very specific conversation I had with a friend We were talking about the Japanese internment that happened in the 1940s in the United States, right? They locked up American citizens. People born in the United States of Japanese descent were locked up because of racism. They were scared that they were working with the Japanese, you know, blah, 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 all these lies. And if they did that to American citizens, what could we expect for us, right? And to some people, it sounds exaggerated, like, no way that could happen in 2016. Are you sure? Did you see what happened on January 6th at the Capitol? Like, we can't be sure about these things. Like, it's not us exaggerating, it's us very genuinely being concerned, and with a very good reason to be, right? So yeah, that continues to be a concern.
How do you deal with that?
I
Where
mean,
do you go with that?
You know, you honestly, I personally just hope for the best. I think, okay, as long as I stay out of trouble, I should be fine, right? As long as I don't do anything crazy, as long as I'm not getting myself in these situations I'm not supposed to be in, I'm fine. But that becomes complicated sometimes. And going back to the question about how am I political in this way, right? So I want to be out in the streets, at the protests, at the rallies, at the marches. I want to do that. But what do I risk, right? Well, I risk my work permit. I risk, you know, folks in my own home being put in danger. So sometimes I have to sit it out. And I really, really hate that. It's this like internal battle within myself about like, well, I'm leaving my people alone, my community, the people that need me, but like I'm protecting the people at home. So it's this really insane battle, right? Between like, is it worth it? Is it not? Am I really at risk? Am I not? It's really complicated to navigate sometimes. Last summer, you know, when there were the uprisings about, you know, the racial injustices that continue to occur in the country, I decided that I was going to go out to the protest, but I was scared. Like, the minute I saw something get a little bit rowdy, I was like, all right, I'm a dip. You know, I gotta go because I can't risk what I have. I really cannot. So then at the end of the day, who wins with that, right? Well, not us, because there's less people on the street because we got something to lose now. So yeah, it's very, very complicated sometimes. And I give so many props to the folks that, you know, are still doing sit-ins and still, you know, continue to advocate in those ways, because the amount of courage that takes is, oh, it's insane.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yep.
I do know there was another question. So I know Michael mentioned, you know, the U.S. As a colonizer, right? I also do want to mention, so in Mexico, within Mexico, my parents are from different places. So my dad is from Veracruz, which is sort of like on the southeast of Mexico. My mom is from Jalisco, which is sort of like in the central coast of Mexico. They both migrated when they were young to different cities because situations were bad in their home states. So they, you know, I feel like sometimes people think that, you know, why didn't immigrants just try to make it work at home? They did. And they tried in different states and they moved around a couple times to see if things were better in any other place, and they weren't. Like, this was literally the last option. Nobody wants to leave their home. Nobody wants to leave everything they know. Nobody wants to go to a place where they don't know anybody, don't speak the language, got to start all over. Nobody wants to do that. So you really have to imagine, you know, how difficult it has to be at home for you to say, this is the only option I have. Nobody comes here just to be here. Like, it's not a decision that anybody makes or takes lightly, right? So, you know, just wanted to highlight that, you know, a lot of people go through that as well. They try their hardest to make it work in their homes, and they can't. It just doesn't work. I remember my dad used to work nights. At that time, it was just me and my mom. I was 4 years old. He was gone at night. So what would my mom and I do? Push all the furniture to the door, and we would cover the door with our furniture because there were people that were, you know, breaking in and doing, you know, terrible things. So that, you know, I have this memory of as a 4-year-old of having to do that. push all my furniture to block the front door because, hey, you never know. Because, hey, it happened to the person that lived downstairs, right? What's to say that it's not going to be our apartment next, right? So, people are dealing with situations much worse than that, so much worse than that. So, I think it's really important to remember that as well. Any other questions?
Anyone else? If I know. Okay,
I
Marika.
have a question. Yeah. What policy changes do you hope to see in the future years to make immigration less restrictive?
Yeah. So, like was mentioned at the beginning, right, by Christina, like, first of all, I want to see something that addresses the folks that are already here. Right. So I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I can tell you that a majority of immigrants in the United States have been here for more than 10 years. So that means that, like was being said earlier, we are immigrants by definition, we are settled. And not only are we settled, we are very settled, right? We live here, this is our home, we're not going anywhere in the foreseeable future. That's the reality, right? So I want to see something that will allow people to work, right? To get that benefit of having that work permit, because that's such a big difference. When there were conversations about DACA being rescinded, people weren't scared about being deported. People were scared about losing their work permits. People were scared about not being able to work, right? Because that's the livelihood, right? So I would definitely want to see something that addresses that initially. I know Biden proposed something not too long ago. Like I was mentioning, there have been all kinds of things proposed. There's so many different things going around. But and this sort of goes back to Michael's point, right, about addressing the root cause of displacement, which a lot of the times has to deal with the United States, right? I had a conversation last Thursday. Thankfully, I'm a part of various spaces that I'm able to connect with folks in different spaces. We had a conversation with an individual who is an asylum seeker in Mexico. He comes from Central America, but he's in Mexico right now. He received asylum there. He was explaining to us, right, why it is that the United States can give aid to Central American countries and why that's going to make absolutely no difference and why it's actually going to increase displacement, right? So the United States wants to give $4 billion to Central American governments. That's not going to help. Why? Because the money doesn't go to the people. The money isn't put into jobs. The money is used for American benefits, right? So then you send money to, say, the government in Honduras, right? I'm just giving an example. You send money to the government in Honduras. The United States says, cool, I'm gonna send this money to you, but I need you to build a dam. I need a canal or something, right? And my products are gonna come through here. And then a company like Nike is gonna come put in a factory over here. And, the displacement starts because, yeah, maybe there are jobs when that starts to build, but then what, right? And the wages, they're not getting paid in dollars. They're getting paid in, whatever is the currency in the country. And it's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of money at all, right? So, and of course, there's corruption in these places. And obviously there's corruption in all governments. The United States isn't the exception. But, there's this sort of, I don't know, people think that that doing something like giving aid to these countries is addressing the root cause. No, the root cause is here. We are the root cause, right? And I say we like if I were an American, right? Not necessarily, but the US is the root cause. So, giving these countries money is not going to fix anything. So to answer your question, right, we want to see something that actually addresses that. But for the United States to admit to itself that the United States is the bad guy, when is that going to happen? Right? Like Joe Biden just bombed another country, but that's okay because it's not Trump, right? Like when are we going to admit it to ourselves? It's never going to happen. It's sad to say, but I don't see that happening in the foreseeable future. I hope that answered your question. Anything else?
Anyone else have a question? I wonder if I can engage a little further in what you just said, Wes. Someone else may be thinking about a question. If others if you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself right away so that if I see that you're unmuted, I can call on you and I can stop talking. But, you know, we want to get as much of a Leti as we can. So can I push you a little bit further on the cons and the question about, we don't disagree with you that we are the root cause. The United States is the root cause. Can you talk a little more about then, you know, I know it's an incredibly complex idea, but do you have any further thoughts on how we can be more engaged? You know, if it's not only waiting for a government to do something, but then how can we be more engaged in addressing the root cause? And, you know, and we don't want to be a problem either. So that the other question I have is, what is a proper way to talk about, you know, lack of better words and lack of knowledge on my part, the community that's here without documentation and, you know, without paperwork? You know, it just seems that to calling them just immigrants or calling them undocumented just doesn't seem, you know, some of it just seems wrong and some of it is not comprehensive enough. And if we want to be good allies with the community, then how should we be thinking about the community and what are the ways that we can talk about community that is most kosher?
Sure, and thank you so much for asking that question. So a couple things, right? I know a lot of people use the term dreamer to refer to undocumented youth. Lots of us don't like that term because, you know, you go back to like what I was mentioning earlier. Okay, you're gonna classify me as a dreamer because I have these big ambitions and dreams, but like my parents, right, why aren't they considered dreamers? Do they not have dreams? Do their goals not matter? Right? But we have also seen some folks sort of reclaim that word and just make it their own, right? Give their own definition to it. So some folks are still comfortable with saying or identifying as dreamers, and, you know, cool if they are, that's cool. I personally, I am not, for the reason that I mentioned, but other folks maybe. But I would advise, you know, do not use the word dreamer for the most part when you're, you know, talking about immigrant youth. I would say when you call a person undocumented, it doesn't sound like you're giving this person or like you're humanizing this person. Maybe it doesn't sound like that, but the reality is that that's probably like the least offensive word you can use at this point, right? Like whenever I say or share my status, I do say DACA mented because it is very different to be a DACA recipient than to not be a DACA recipient, right? Because I have privileges that they do not, right? So I want to make that clear right off the bat because I don't want to say I'm undocumented and then someone who doesn't have any, you know, access to these programs say that they're undocumented. Like, we're clearly not on the same boat. I have a privilege that they do not have for no fault of their own and for no, you know, specific skill of my own. It's just, you know, that's just how it worked out for some dumb rules, right? So I wouldn't say you saying undocumented is wrong or is inappropriate or is offensive. You know, I definitely don't think so. In the state of California, though, and I know, I don't know if you're all familiar with Professor Manuel Pastor at USC. If you haven't, I highly recommend you shoot him an email, chat with him, talk to him. He has like 1,000 different things he can share with you. But he says, in the state of California, he says undocumented Californians, because we are Californians. We just happen to not have, you know, paperwork that we were born here because we're not, but we are Californians, right? So he usually says that undocumented Californians, and I really appreciate the way that he puts it into context. In terms of what folks can do, right? I think we've seen a lot that the narrative that is you know, drawn around us is, oh, but hey, they pay taxes, but hey, they just want to work, hey, but, you know, like sort of like tying back everything that we do to money and to the benefit that we bring the United States, right? And hey, well, we put in, you know, $11 billion into Social Security, like, you know, don't you want us here? Don't you want your Social Security? Like, that narrative is disturbing, right? Because we're human, because we, you know, I don't know anybody whose goal in life is to do labor, right, to work, right, just for the sake of working, right, that's not our dream. We're not here just to work. We're here to live. And to live means, you know, so many different things. It means to build a family if that's what you want, right? It means to go to school if that's what you want. It means, you know, it can mean whatever you want it to mean. So our, you know, us being here shouldn't be tied back to money every single time just because we, you know, just because there's farm workers that pick, you know, vegetables for folks, or just because, like I mentioned, we pay taxes. Like, you know, if you're defending us and those are the claims you're using, like, good, but you should also remember that we're human, and that, you know, that narrative makes a huge difference. And it's something that we're trying to push as a movement, right? Something that we've been trying to push as a movement, just because we're really tired of folks thinking of us like, oh, they work hard, they just do labor, right? That's not it. That's not all we are. So I definitely encourage folks to, you know, encourage other folks to see us in that more, you know, humane light. And also, right, just encourage folks to remember that not every undocumented person wants to go to college. Not every undocumented person has a 4 point whatever GPA, right? And that's okay. That doesn't make them, you know, any less worthy of being in this country. You don't have to go above and beyond to be in this country, right? You shouldn't have to. And the fact that there's this narrative that's like, but look at how hard they work, and look at, you know, that excludes a lot of people, and that makes a lot of people feel like they're not a part of our community when they are. So yeah, I hope that helps. And I think, Michael, you have a question?
Yeah, I had a question. I wanted to. I'm really curious to hear about your DC experience a little more because
Sure.
I actually also interned at DC one summer,
Oh,
and
awesome.
so because I was there for a summer and my experiences there, it just I was part of the internship. Well, so I worked with the United Methodist Church. The United Methodist Church has its own like building on Capitol Hill, and it's actually the building is next to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And um, but I worked with another organization. I worked with another nonprofit in DC. But it's just that the Methodist Church, they were the one that paid me. Um, it's just very interesting to hear. I just want to hear more about your experience in DC because when I was there, like it felt I mean it could be just me, but it felt so much like a bubble there. It just felt like people there just little things like everyone wearing these professional suits, walking in a certain way. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
in and me, I'm not someone that likes to wear suits a lot, and I don't like to wear professional stuff a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel the same way there? Would you mind kind of elaborating on your experiences there, how you felt? Because for me, it just feels it's a huge bubble, and it just feels like people don't really know what's really going on outside of DC.
Can I ask you, Michael, what year was this?
This was summer of I want to say 2018. It was 2018, 2019.
2019. Okay. Yeah, so I definitely felt out of place. You know, and yeah, it's a very different vibe, right? Like, you get on the train and people are super well dressed, and people are reading the newspaper, and people are having conversations about work, and you know, that's not what it looks like when you're on the metro in LA, right, in downtown LA. Right? It's very different. So yeah, I definitely felt out of place. I didn't have, you know, money to buy fancy clothes, and I was interning in the Senate, right? So I had my little badge for the US Senate, but sometimes I felt like, you know, what am I doing here? Um, definitely felt out of place. Definitely see what you mean about that bubble, right? Sort of everyone is there to work, but like, what are you really doing? That was my question. Like, what are you really doing? Because I don't see you making any kind of difference. So like, what are you really doing? Like, you're over here thinking that you're so important, and you're, you know, you have these high end jobs, but like, what are you really doing? Because I don't see any benefit anywhere. um you know, aside from that, just the fact that I was an undocumented person going through the Senate every single day and, you know, going through security. Like, I don't know, it was scary. Like, I felt like any day now they'd be like, oh, you're undocumented, you're not supposed to be here. And I was actually, for context, actually, I think I should really explain this. So I was advised, again, counselor, but this was a little bit different. I was advised to reconsider my participation in the program. Maybe, you know, I shouldn't go to the program because the program started on January 7th and ended on March, I want to say 17th. My work permit happened to expire on March 18th. And when my work permit expires, my license expires. And what does that mean? My travel documents expire. I can't travel, right? So one bad storm, one bad delay, all my IDs become, you know, not valid. And how am I going to get on a plane? Right. So that was the concern that my advisor had at that time. Like, maybe you shouldn't go, right? Because there was also the concern that, you know, come January 20th, they could have said, the administration could have said, hey, we're going to cancel DACA and like all your work permits immediately become not usable anymore. Like, you can't use anymore, right? That was a legit concern that people had at that time. So I was walking around every single day, you know, thinking, is he going to do it today? Is it going to happen today? Did you hear anything today? You know, did I miss anything today? That was a very real fear and concern of mine about getting back home. I would have figured something out. Our people are so resourceful. I would have figured it out somehow, right? I would have gone back home somehow. But obviously my advisor was just letting me know, hey, this may happen. We don't know. Maybe you want to reconsider, right? So for me, that was probably the biggest and the scariest thing about being there. You know, aside from the fact that I was broke, it's so hard to pay for everything because it's a super expensive, you know, town. But no, I definitely felt like I didn't fit in there at first. I do want to say that towards the end, I started to sort of, you know, appreciate policy. A lot of it had to do with the fact that I was very fortunate to have a supervisor who actually happened to have the same name as me. She was a Cuban American woman. She was an immigrant herself. So I think she understood me to some extent. Obviously, the Cuban experience is very different, and that's a whole different conversation, right? But, you know, I shared with her in the fact that we were both immigrants. We shared the same first name. Based on what she told me, we had very similar mothers. We had a very similar character. So I was very fortunate to find this one person that was able to guide me. And it wasn't really until, you know, sort of towards the end that I started feeling more comfortable with being there and feeling like, hey, I belong in this space too. But it was very difficult to get there. It was very difficult. I hope that answers. Any other questions?
Does anyone else want to? Did everybody ask the questions you wanted to ask tonight?
I'll also go ahead and drop my email in the chat if anybody ever wants to reach out in that way. Feel free to do so.
Yeah, you know, as you know, with the Leti here, as we are finishing up our conversation, we're just grateful, and we hope that you will be, you know, that we can engage you again in the future for more further conversations. So the last question that I have for you is, what do you see happening now? Where are you now with this change? You know, there was initial hope and some disappointment with the Biden administration. But as a woman of color living in the United States, with the election of Kamala Harris as a vice president, where is your sense of hope? And where does your hope and support come from as you are still in this midst of this limbo type of a thing? And what do you think about what Biden has talked about? You know, initially talked about the 80-year process of the citizenship and so on.
Yeah, of course. So my hope and support always comes from my community. Always, you know, everything that I do, and my community obviously includes my immediate family, the folks that I grew up with, the folks that I've, like I mentioned, found along this path, right? Absolutely none of what I've been able to do would have been possible without them, right? If you don't have that kind of support, if you're not backed by folks like that hype you up and are here for you in the lows and the highs, like none of what we do would be possible. So my hope and support always lies in them. We never depend on any specific form of government or any organizations. We depend on each other, and we're the ones that pull through at the end. And just for a little bit of context, right, when the pandemic hit initially, right, my parents were completely undocumented. My father lost his job immediately, right? I was able to work from home. I still work from home. My dad lost his job immediately. He, not eligible for unemployment, not eligible for a stimulus check, not eligible for anything, right? He went to go look for another job, literally anywhere he could find one. He took the first one he could find because, we needed money. 2 weeks got COVID. And, we were fortunate that he made it out. I mean, we all caught COVID because, he came home and he brought it home and we all got sick. Fortunate that we were all okay, right? Because obviously that hasn't been the case for over 500,000 Americans. But, what happens when you can't work from home? What happens when you're not eligible for a stimulus check? What happens when you're, we're seeing that in LA. In LA, Latinos in November were 1,000% more likely to die because of COVID, 1,000%. And the same goes for Black folks, right? So it's these flaws in the system that we have already known, that we've already seen, but these big events sort of magnify it, right? And I say that because the government didn't help us. Organizations didn't help us. Who helped us? Our community. It was family, friends, members. So we, my parents mostly, I won't say we, my parents mostly, are very involved in the Catholic Church here where we live in the city of Baldwin Park. And it was them that came to our house, delivered groceries, helped us cover our rent that month, right? Without them, I honestly have no idea what we would have done. So my hope and my support always comes from the community, no matter what. So with Vice President Kamala Harris, I've had the opportunity to meet her a couple different times just through my job and through the work that we do. And, she's always been nothing but kind to me personally and to our programming. The night when, after was it like a week and a half that it took to decide the election. So the night that they finally, came out and gave the speech, that joint speech in Delaware, I heard Joe Biden speak and I was like, it was a matter of time, just Joe Biden. But then Kamala Harris came on the stage and, obviously she's had some issues as a person that's worked in police enforcement. She was sort of like the top cop in the state of California, right? So obviously that gives some of us some issues. But to see her, to hear her, to see her nieces, to see her nephews, to see people of color, people of immigrant backgrounds on that stage, it something clicked in me, something very deep inside of me just sort of like was shaken up, and I was like, whoa, like this is actually happening, like this is actually different. And for some people, that moment was in 2008 or 2012 with Barack Obama. I feel like I wasn't politically aware to realize the magnitude of those things at that time. So for me, this was this moment, right? And it doesn't mean that I agree with everything that they do. God knows I don't. I barely agree with half of the things that they do. But representation really is a big deal. And now that this has happened, I really want to see more people of color in those spaces. And it really encourages us to continue to push for that, because we shouldn't be there. We shouldn't be saying that, again, just because we don't agree with them, them being there isn't, of ginormous importance, because it is. It really is. There were all these videos going around of little girls seeing her, and the impact that's going to make on them is going to be enormous. So that is something that I definitely do look forward to. Hopefully in the next 10, 20 years, maybe not in time for my generation, but for my kids, hopefully, right, they can see a lot more of this more often. And then, of course, the idea that was pitched by the Biden administration about the 8 years sounds better than what we have now, right? It sounds like an actual plan. So, right now, like the only way I'd be able to adjust status is if I were to get married. And I don't want to get married for the sake of adjusting status, because that's not what I want to do with my life. If, I want to marry once and for the right reason and not for that, right? So I am not willing to compromise my values in that way. to get this piece of paper, right? So you know, this is an actual plan, and I would love to see more of that in future legislation, and hopefully we can actually adopt some of those things pretty soon.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Leti. We are grateful that you took your time this evening to be with us. It's just incredibly informative. You know, everyone, you want to just share, so thank you by waving to Leti and just let her know that we are truly appreciative of everything that she has done for us tonight. Does anyone have any last question? Otherwise, we will say thank you here, and then we hope that we can connect with you again. And
yeah, of course.
And I do want to, and I will be reaching out to you. Hope to connect with you, and because we want to engage in some other kind of conversations along the way as well.
Yeah, of course, and I can also connect you with other folks that have very different experiences from me.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Let me, before you go any further, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.